The sea was a place where the ruthless and the daring could rise to legendary status. And among all the pirates who sailed the treacherous waters of the Caribbean, one man's name has echoed through the centuries with unparalleled ferocity: Blackbeard. But why? What was it about Edward Teach, or Thatch as he was born, that not only made him a feared pirate in his time, but also carved his name in the annals of history, keeping him in the minds of millions even today? Was it his brutal tactics, his unforgettable image, or something more? The truth is, Blackbeard's legend isn't just a tale of plunder and chaos. It's a deeper story about fear, power, and the creation of an icon that would transcend time itself. This is the life of Edward Teach, the man who became Blackbeard, and the reason why, nearly 3 centuries later, the world remembers him. Born in the early 1690s in Bristol, England, Edward Teach's entry into the world wasn't marked by any extraordinary event. There were no signs that he would one day become the most feared pirate on the 7 seas. His early years remain a mystery, with few records detailing his upbringing. Some claim he served in the British Navy, while others suggest he came from a long line of sailors. What we do know for sure is that by the early 1710s, Teach had made his way to the Caribbean and was already beginning his transformation into Blackbeard. But it wasn't just his pirating skills that set him apart. It was his presence, the aura he cultivated, that made him a living nightmare on the seas. Imagine the scene: the wind howling through the sails, the rumbling of thunder in the distance as a massive ship crests the waves. Out of the mist, a dark figure emerges, tall, menacing, and cloaked in a thick black beard. Teach, once an ordinary man, had now become a symbol. His beard, which he kept long and wild, was decorated with pieces of slow-burning fuses, which he would light during battle. As the smoke curled from his face, his eyes seemed to gleam with madness, and to anyone unlucky enough to meet him in battle, it looked as though the devil himself had come to claim their souls. This wasn't just a pirate, it was a terror, a walking nightmare that made grown men quake in their boots. The truth is, Blackbeard wasn't just feared for his fighting skills. He was feared because he knew the most powerful weapon of all, the weapon of fear itself. But fear wasn't the only thing Blackbeard used to his advantage. His tactics were ruthless and brilliant, designed to instill terror in his victims before a single shot was fired. When he captured a ship, he often did so without a fight. Blackbeard understood the psychological power of intimidation. His ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, was a floating fortress, heavily armed with cannons and crewed by hardened pirates who had no qualms about violence. But Blackbeard knew that the sight of his ship alone was often enough to send enemies fleeing. If that didn't work, his terrifying appearance and his reputation would. On the rare occasion that a battle occurred, Blackbeard's crew would often board the enemy ship, leaving a trail of chaos in their wake. Yet even then, he used his cunning to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, favoring the surrender of his victims over slaughter. It was a game of psychological warfare, a terrifying display of power that made him almost unstoppable. Blackbeard's rise wasn't just about terror, though. It was about making his mark in a world that was filled with pirates. The golden age of piracy was a time when the Caribbean was teeming with opportunistic sailors, all looking to carve out their own legacies. But Blackbeard didn't just want wealth, he wanted to be remembered. It wasn't enough to be feared. He wanted to be an icon, to have a lasting impact on history. And he succeeded. His exploits, his persona, and his very name would linger long after his death. At the height of his reign, Blackbeard controlled a significant fleet, with the Queen Anne's Revenge as his flagship. He terrorized the American colonies, the West Indies, and even parts of the Gulf of Mexico, holding entire regions under his sway. One of his most infamous actions occurred in 1717, when he blockaded the port of Charleston, South Carolina, capturing several ships and holding the town hostage for ransom. It was a daring move that showed his tactical genius and his ability to exploit the political and economic vulnerabilities of his targets. He knew that in order to maintain his dominance, he had to remain unpredictable, a figure that no one could anticipate. And it worked. His name spread like wildfire, carried through whispers of fear across the seas. But Blackbeard's reign was not without enemies. The British Empire, which had long tolerated the pirates of the Caribbean as a necessary evil during wartime, grew increasingly alarmed at Blackbeard's audacity. In 1718, Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia, eager to put an end to Blackbeard's terror, dispatched a force to capture him. Led by Lieutenant Robert Maynard, the British Navy launched an assault on Blackbeard's ship, and in a brutal battle off the coast of North Carolina, Blackbeard met his end. But even in death, Blackbeard's legend continued to grow. He was killed in a fierce fight, reportedly taking 5 gunshots and 20 sword wounds before collapsing. His head was severed and hung from the bowsprit of Maynard's ship as a grim trophy, a warning to anyone who would dare follow in his footsteps. Yet, despite his gruesome death, Blackbeard's myth persisted. His body, now a symbol of untamed ferocity, became part of the very folklore that kept his legend alive. His death was not the end of his story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter, one where his name would echo through the centuries. In the years that followed, his exploits became part of pirate lore, inspiring countless stories, books, and films that would perpetuate his image as the quintessential pirate. But what is it about Blackbeard that keeps him relevant? Why is it that his story has endured long after his death? The answer lies in how he embodied the very essence of piracy: the allure of the outlaw, the hunger for power, and the irresistible pull of danger. In a world where empires clashed and the sea was a battleground, Blackbeard was more than just a pirate. He was a symbol of defiance, an outlaw who challenged authority and reveled in his lawlessness. He was not bound by the rules of the land. He was a creature of the sea, where he could write his own laws. His persona, carefully cultivated and designed to strike fear into the hearts of all who crossed him, made him a figure of myth. But at the same time, it was his intelligence, his calculated ruthlessness, and his ability to inspire loyalty in his crew that made him a legend. Blackbeard wasn't just about violence. He was a master of branding, a man who understood that the image of the pirate was just as important as the pirate himself. His legendary status wasn't accidental. It was crafted through years of careful planning, ruthless action, and the careful manipulation of fear. So why do we still remember Blackbeard? It's because he represents something timeless: the thrill of the outlaw, the power of fear, and the search for immortality in a world that often forgets. Blackbeard understood that to be remembered was to make an impact, and he did so with every raid, every fight, every action. His legacy endures because it taps into the deepest parts of our human nature: the fascination with rebellion, with defiance, and with the eternal struggle for power. We remember him because he dared to be different, because he took risks that others would never have dreamed of, and because he became a symbol of everything that was both terrifying and fascinating about piracy. In the end, Blackbeard wasn't just a man. He was a force of nature, a living embodiment of the chaotic spirit of piracy that continues to captivate our imaginations. His death may have ended his reign, but his legend lives on, a reminder that in a world full of ordinary men, sometimes it's the audacious, the terrifying, and the unforgettable that make the most lasting impact. Blackbeard's story is a testament to the power of myth, the allure of danger, and the eternal human drive to be remembered. And in that, he will always be with us, sailing through the mists of time, never truly gone. His reign as a pirate may have been brief, but Blackbeard's legacy was forever etched into the very fabric of history. The myth that he carefully constructed and the reality of his audacity have continued to intertwine, making him a figure that remains larger than life. His name has become synonymous with piracy, as enduring as the very seas he sailed. It's not just his violent end that kept his story alive, it was the way he commanded the attention of his time. By leveraging fear as a tool, Blackbeard became the ultimate pirate, a figure so entrenched in legend that even today, the mere mention of his name conjures images of the terrifying, indomitable figure who once ruled the waves. Perhaps it's also the fact that Blackbeard, despite his notorious cruelty, was a pirate who ultimately understood the power of spectacle. He was a master of his image and brand, something that modern figures could even learn from. By creating this larger-than-life persona, he transcended the typical pirate and became an icon. More than just a man, but a symbol of freedom and rebellion, of breaking away from the constraints of the world that feared him. In a time when the boundaries between the lawless and the law-abiding were frequently blurred, Blackbeard's larger-than-life presence made him a constant fixture in the nightmares of those in power. His actions carved a place for him in history books, folklore, and pop culture alike. Even as piracy slowly faded, the figure of Blackbeard endured, cropping up in countless books, movies, and even theme parks. He has been reimagined in every form of media, from the Disney franchise Pirates of the Caribbean to countless novels that romanticize his life. In the process, Blackbeard has transcended time and culture, becoming a symbol not just of piracy, but of the rebellious spirit that pushes boundaries and challenges authority. Why is Blackbeard remembered, even 3 centuries later? Because he embodies what it means to defy the world around you, to embrace the chaos, and to take control of your destiny in a way that makes you unforgettable. Pirates, in all their brutality and lawlessness, were not just criminals, they were rebels against an established order, and Blackbeard, in his terrifying brilliance, was the epitome of that rebellion. His legacy speaks to anyone who has ever fought to leave a mark on the world, to stand apart from the crowd, and to live a life that defies convention. Whether he was a fearsome pirate or a master of psychological warfare, Blackbeard's story is a reflection of the power of myth and the timeless appeal of the outsider who, for a brief time, can become king.